and welcome to Eternal Midnight. I'm Chad, and we've got quite the group here for this episode. In my time zone, Ken, how you doing this morning, man? You got your coffee with you?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. I've just got a glass of water with me. I'm not much of a coffee guy.
Hey, we all have different ways of waking up. I mean, I feel like I just rolled out of bed. Shit. But 12 hours ahead of us, we've got the boys, Santino and Dylan. What's up, guys?
What's up? How are you doing, Dylan?
I'm doing pretty well. Just finished my coffee. That's it.
Nice. So Ken and I are just waking up. You boys are just getting ready to, I don't know, what are you guys doing? Going to the club tonight or something?
In this virus? No. But
Yeah. So Chad, you're using coffee to wake up in the morning. Dylan, you're drinking coffee to stay up at night.
Sure.
what about you, Dylan? What have you got planned for the evening after this?
I don't know. Probably just binge some horror movies.
Nice.
Huge.
Always a good choice. Can never go wrong with horror movies at night.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're doing right now, aren't we? Doing
I was going to say, speaking of that, we are this month talking, what do we want to call these? Horror psychological thrillers?
I'd say yeah.
What would you describe this franchise as? What would you describe the Hannibal, we'll call it the Hannibal Lecter franchise, even though that's not exactly what it is, but what genre would you say this is? Psychological horror?
Crime horror.
I definitely, crime horror. Definitely, I think Silence of the Lambs is more horror than any of them.
Sure.
But crime horror, thriller.
I'd see the more psychological thriller because I don't know. I feel like if you call Silence horror, you'll also have to call Seven a horror movie, and I don't really consider it that.
Seven definitely toes the line, I think, though. I mean,
Yeah. As the Hannibal movies do, I would say.
yeah. I think these are genuinely, I think these are the types of ones you can decide what they are, like almost to yourself. Like, you can't look at Friday the 13th and say it's anything but horror because that's what it is. But with Silence of the Lambs, these movies, because, yeah, like Red Dragon, Manhunter, I don't know if I'd call those horror.
Agreed.
Hannibal, definitely. Hannibal is a comedy.
Oh, yeah. I'll say this. I mean, and not to, sully the name of horror, but I feel like there's a great quote about pornography, and it's I don't know how to define pornography, but I know it when I see it. And I feel like that's the same thing with horror, It's like I can't give it a specific definition, but I know it when I see it.
Right, perfect.
Yeah.
So we will get this month's retrospective going. We're going to be talking Manhunter versus Red Dragon. I mean, kind of makes sense to combine them since they're adapting the same book. But they are both great in their own ways, and they both succeed at being the adaptations that they are. So, who wants to kick us off with which of the two is your favorite?
Well, I'll say having just watched Manhunter for the first time, I had seen Red Dragon before, but watching Manhunter, I gotta say, maybe it's just because it's the fresher movie to me, but I enjoyed Manhunter better, surprisingly. And there are things I like better about Red Dragon, but we'll get into that.
Dylan?
God, it's really close for me. But for the sake of discussion, I'll have to say that I prefer Manhunter slightly over the Red Dragon. I think it has more of its own personality and style rather than just trying to be Silence of the Lambs again.
Yeah.
Cool. Santino?
Red Dragon. I've watched both, and I watched Manhunter the first time for this retrospective, and I'm really sorry. I really have to agree with Chad. I think Red Dragon is really better than Silence of the Lambs. Sorry, Red Dragon is better than.
Wow, I would say that's a bold statement right there.
Sorry, no, wrong. Red Dragon is better than Manhunter by a slight margin, just a slight margin.
Okay.
Yep, I'm there with Santino. I do like Red Dragon. It's like if it was one of those like scales, it would be like 51 to 49. It's barely better. There's
Same.
so much Manhunter gets better. There's stuff Red Dragon does better, but I think between the two, I'd rather watch. Like if someone was like, pick one to watch right now, I'd go with Red Dragon, I think.
Yeah. So at
So
least
let's go
I was
ahead.
just gonna say we're all in agreement that whatever one we like better, it's just a slight victory over it.
Yeah, just
Yep,
a very
because
slight victory.
yeah, both are great. So let's jump into those. Let's jump into those reasons. Santino, what do you love about Red Dragon?
Okay, Red Dragon for me is like, okay, so Red Dragon holds a special place in my heart because it was the very first out of all the Hannibal Lecter movies I watched.
Ooh,
So this was
nice.
the very first one, and I remember exactly where I was when it came out. It came out on Netflix last year, and I remember it was middle of the pandemic, like people were not going out to quarantine. So I remember bringing up my laptop, and there it was, Red Dragon. I was like, I've never seen any of the Hannibal movies, so yeah, why not? I'll give it a shot. And I remember just like being fucking blown away by this amazing, well-crafted movie about trying to catch a killer, and of course, I knew who Anthony Hopkins was, and I knew that Hannibal Lecter was one of his best roles, but I was not exposed to him in Silence of the Lambs first. It was this one. It was.
Okay.
Yeah, so I do like Edward Norton as Graham, and I do like Lecter as I do like Ralph Fiennes as the Tooth Fairy compared to the Manhunter comparisons. Really, I just feel like, yeah, those are my like Tooth Fairy and Graham. I does that make sense? Or like no?
No,
Really.
it does.
I
It
gotcha.
does. It absolutely makes sense.
I gotcha. I would like to go into. So there are plenty of things that I think Red Dragon does better. But okay, so for me, I like William Peterson as Will Graham a lot better than
Yep.
than Ed Norton, and my reason for liking him better is he just seems like a more complex, more distraught character, because you can tell, he's had his own struggles with mental illness. They even delve into that a little better in Manhunter, and the scene that really kills it for me is when he's first interviewing Dr. Lecter, and Dr. Lecter started saying, do you know why you were able to catch me? It's because we think so much alike. And he's like banging on the door trying to get out. He's freaking out, and he gets out of the cell, and he just starts running out of the prison. And the reason that I think that's so good is not only because we know, Hannibal is locked up. He's not going to come running after him. So why is he running? He's running because he has to get away from him. He just feels this psychological need, like, I need to get away from this. I need to get away from this as fast as possible and as far away as possible.
Mm-hmm. That was done. So that's how you portray. Like that's how more movies need to take like almost notes on that. Like that's how you portray somebody mentally going through something. There's no way Lecter didn't even like sit up or get up from the bench he was on, and this guy was just terrified being in his presence because of what Lecter was like projecting onto him, reminding him of, and he's just like, the further I get away from this man, the better. It's like, oh, it was so well done. So, like, and compare that to Red Dragon. That exact scene in Red Dragon, Ed Norton's version, he was calm, he was composed, and he didn't seem freaked out, like, in the slightest. And that's why I completely agree. I prefer Peterson way more than Norton.
Yeah.
I also wanted to cite a moment in both movies. It's near the beginning when Will is investigating the lead's house, and in both versions, he watches the TV and he kind of like recreates the scene of the crime in his head.
Yeah.
So it's like you took off your gloves because you wanted to touch her, didn't you? And in Edward Norton's version, it's more like he's having a realization, like an epiphany, aha moment. Whereas with William Peterson, you get a sense that he's kind of like shedding his skin, like his sense of normalcy, and he's just slowly unleashing like his inner like psychopath. Like right before, like when he arrives at the lead's house, I'm not sure if they did this in Red Dragon, but he calls his wife just so he can like hear a woman's voice, and that's what kind of transitions him to the mood of being, the Tooth Fairy.
Yeah,
And I thought
because
that was done much more effectively.
yeah, because like in Manhunter, it's more like this is sort of like his outlet for getting this madness out of him, and so he like lets it out here. And yeah, like you said in Manhunter, that's how it's portrayed more than, like you said, the aha moment for Ed Norton's version.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to weigh in here. For me, the reason why I like Edward Norton more as Graham is because the fact that Edward Norton seemed more human, especially especially in the last act of Red Dragon, where the Tooth Fairy has his kid hostage. It felt like he was more human. They humanized Graham more. I always get the vibe from Manhunter that Graham was a bit more robotic and not like I can't really relate to him. But in Graham Red Dragon, yeah,
I wouldn't say robotic, but he definitely felt more repressed because he does have those like they explained when he's in the grocery with his son about how he was like locked in a mental asylum for a while.
Yep.
It's like he has to control.
Such a damn good scene.
I know.
Yes, which is I think more accurate to the books. You're right in saying that Ed Norton's the more relatable protagonist, but I think William Peterson's version is just far more interesting.
Yeah,
I
never
agree.
got the feeling. I never got the feeling that Norton's version, like, obviously we saw how he captured Lecter, but aside from that, I never really felt like this character was like broken and just holding on by a string, and like moving down to Florida was like his vice to be like, this is what keeps me sane. Whereas with Ed Norton, he just I don't. He never felt like everything he'd gone through had truly like broken or traumatized him.
Yeah, I would say I think it depends on, what you're looking for in the protagonist. Like Ed Norton is a person you can relate to more because he's more, hey, I'm firmly a good guy. They do sort of hint that, he had a troubled past, but firmly he is a good guy and he is sort of like your everyman, he's a cop. But Peterson, I think, is a little more interesting in that, he's towing that line of like his own mental health.
Definitely. So let's jump to the next character. Let's get the big one out of the way because this is the one where I want to hear everyone's opinions. Let's go with Lecter. Dylan, let's start with you.
That is probably the hardest choice for me because obviously Anthony Hopkins, he's legendary. You hear the name Lecter, you immediately think of Anthony Hopkins.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Cox gives a very different kind of performance, and I mentioned this to you like in one of our conversations that Lecter definitely feels like a cinematic movie villain, whereas Brian Cox almost feels like you're watching footage of a real psychopath. Much more nuanced in his performance. His there isn't as much of like that flair, not as much of like the sinisterness you get from Anthony Hopkins.
Like the scene where he was talking to Ed, like I know what you're talking about. That scene where he's like talking to Ed Norton and he's like in that little walk around area or whatever.
Yeah,
and he just
like hisses at him.
lunges forward. Yeah, like Cox never had to resort to. And the hard part with this one is we'd seen Hopkins in the role 3 times now. Yeah. So it's almost, unless you'd only seen Red Dragon and Manhunter and you never saw the other ones, this is almost an impossible question to forget how this version of Lecter from Hopkins.
And also they increased Lecter's part in Red Dragon. He's in it a lot more than Brian Cox was. Now, what I want to say is different about their performances is, Anthony Hopkins, he's got his trademark way of playing the character, but he's a little more like slow and calculating. And, it's just like, what's one of his lines? He's like, that whole banter was just like where Will says, I was wondering to see if you wanted to help, see if you're smarter than the person I'm trying to catch. Well, then by implication, you think you're smarter than I am because it was you who caught me. he's just sort of got this like intense stare. Whereas Brian Cox, I think the best way to describe him is he's more laid back. He's more casual about it. You know, it's just like, wanted to see if you were smarter than the person I'm trying to catch. Well, then by implication, you think you're smarter than I am. It's just sort of like a smug like roll off his shoulder. He's just more casual the way he talks. Like, yeah, I know I'm a super intelligent criminal. I don't have to act like it.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
feel though like I feel though that's part of his charm, honestly. The fact that
absolutely.
the fact that Lecter has that cinematic feel to it is because that's why I prefer him over Cox, because he knows he's smart, and you know what, he's gonna be a bit petty. He's gonna act dramatic because he knows he's smarter than Graham. He really does. Just because Graham caught him doesn't mean that he's a smarter guy. He was just careless, and that's why.
Yeah, well, like he said, you know, he got lucky because you have a disadvantage. You're insane.
You mean he did get lucky? He really did. That's the only word for how Will stopped him. If he hadn't been anywhere near those arrows, Will would have died that night.
Yeah, definitely.
I think also another scene to cite what I like about Cox's portrayal is the phone call scene where he's able to acquire Will's address. In the Michael Mann version, he speaks in a very like casual, flowery, how are you today? He seems very friendly, whereas Anthony Hopkins is still kind of doing that sinister Hannibal Lecter voice there.
Yeah, like the way he asks for it, he's like, be a good dear and get me that number.
Yeah.
It's like, if I was on the line and I'm not supposed to give away information and someone's talking to me that way, it's like, no, sorry, I'm not helping you.
Exactly. Just Brian Cox's way of being just like, oh, hey, I bet you have it in the Rolodex there. Could you check there? Just that sounds like the way a normal person talks. But but I mean, for me, like Santino said, Anthony Hopkins just being so iconic in the role, and just, I mean, he so embodies the role. This is one I actually can't say which one I like better because they're both so good in their own ways.
Right.
And I think there was one scene when I was watching Red Dragon that involved Hannibal that I thought was unneeded and definitely unnecessary. And I don't want to say it completely brought the movie down, but it kind of in a way did, because it doesn't make any sense, was that very last scene of Chilton talking to him. And he's like, oh, by the way, there's a woman from the FBI here to speak to you. I'm like, why? What? I was like, so all of this took place.
Rogue One ending.
I was like, all of this took place minutes, like days before Silence of the Lambs started. Bullshit.
Yeah, it's really and also just the fact Anthony Hopkins is 12 years older than he was is very distracting to me.
And Harvey Keitel has somehow turned into Scott
skinny.
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead.
At least I got Chilton. I mean, I did like this version of Chilton better, though.
Well, I want to discuss. Like the elephant in the room, the Tooth Fairy. Which Tooth Fairy do you think was better?
This is another one I can't decide which one I like better. They're
because
both
they're
very different.
They're so different and great in their own ways of the completely different night and day portrayals. I mean, do you want a villain you can look at and be scared of but sympathize with, or do you want your main killer to just terrify you and make you shit your pants and you never want to be around someone like this?
So here's the scene that really does it for me, like really portrays how different they are. It's the scene with the reporter like strapped down to the wheelchair.
Right.
Is, you got I just feel like Ralph Fiennes is just so much more intense. Because he's over there, like the way they say this line is so different. Ralph Fiennes is like, open your eyes or I'll staple your eyelids to your forehead, just very intense, screaming at him. Whereas Tom Noonan is he's sort of crazy in his own way, and just how casually he'll say these things. He's just like, open your eyes or I'll staple your eyelids to your forehead.
Yeah.
See, to me, that's almost the killer, like, I would be more afraid of, because it's like, it's that unpredictability.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the way Ralph Fiennes said it was more like, he says it with an intensity that it's like he's going to do it, where it's like he might do it. With Tom Noonan, it's like, no, he actually will go get a stapler, open my eyes, and staple my own skin to my forehead.
Yeah.
Yep. Going back, that goes back again to one that feels more like an actual psychopath and one that feels more like a movie villain.
Yeah. Well, I actually think they both sort of portray a very real psychopath, actually, for me. Because, I mean, when Rafe finds, like, disrobes and he shows that huge back tattoo he has, and the way he just turns his head and smiles is just so damn creepy. Very different from the way Tom Noonan is creepy and just how casually he'll say these horrifying things. But I also will say it's sort of a double-edged sword of whether you're, which way you're going to like, do you like his tragic backstory being hinted at, or do you like it being explicitly spelled out? And I kind of like in Red Dragon it being like spelled out and seeing like how sad his life is.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, either way, they're both great portrayals. Very different, both great.
I generally prefer actually how his character is handled in Red Dragon. I just think his story is better paced because in Manhunter, his identity is mostly kept a secret until the second half. Like we don't even get introduced to, we don't get introduced to Reba until like an hour and 20 minutes into Manhunter.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in
Reba didn't get introduced in Manhunter until after Lowndes had died, right?
yeah. Whereas in Red Dragon, it's much better paced. It consistently cuts back and forth between the investigation and the serial killer. So Reba, his relationship with Reba feels much more fleshed out, whereas it's almost like an afterthought in Manhunter.
Also in Red Dragon, you get more you can see how emotionally attached to her he is. Like when he has to kill her,
Right.
he's like crying and he's just like, I didn't want to do this. You felt so good.
That's
And
why I prefer Red Dragon over Manhunter.
I think this is a point where I agree with you, Santino. Sorry to interrupt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This honestly, the scene, I love both of the endings in the Tooth Fairy's house, but just that scene of him holding the gun to Reba's throat and telling her what kind of gun it is, and she's like, I will say it, that version of Reba is fucking incredible. She did an outstanding job.
Oh yeah.
But it's just like that. The house is burning. I won't let him take you. I'm going to save you. And then we think he kills himself. It's just, that ending is incredible, I thought.
I believe more accurate to the book. I haven't read it, but I think the book does that same fake out double climax ending.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely the more cinematic ending. Whereas in Manhunter, there's actually, I'm very mixed on the final shootout in Manhunter because on one hand, it's a Michael Mann shootout. We have Tom Noonan holding the shotgun with a single hand and shooting a bunch of cops, which is awesome, set to the Inagata-Devita soundtrack.
Yeah.
So cool, but at the same time, I feel like it's almost like the substance just vanished there because Will Graham, rather than shooting the Red Dragon from the window, he chooses to charge to jump through the house.
Mm-hmm.
And at first you think, okay, this is him unleashing his inner psychopath, and no more repression. But then, like 5 seconds later, he instantly gets defeated. He just gets thrown off the floor.
He gets the fridge dumped on him, and he's stuck laying there for a few minutes.
And then the cops all just assemble to the front door and get shot one by one. Yeah. That was a little dumb.
I think I definitely think that Red Dragon probably has a more satisfying ending because first of all, also I got to mention the music in Manhunter. While I like it, it's just sort of funny that over a lot of these intense scenes, you just sort of get 80s pop and rock songs.
Yeah.
But I also think the way he defeats the Tooth Fairy in Red Dragon is a little more satisfying in that in Manhunter, it's just a shootout, running around the house like hiding, take a shot, back and forth. Whereas in Red Dragon, he sort of has to play this psychological game where he sort of recreates the abuse he had as a child.
Right.
Yeah, that was way better than. Yeah, that's exactly right. That was way better than. Than in Manhunter. It's like Will Graham was actually using the information he got to defeat the bad guy. It's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
See, now I will counter that with one thing that I was thinking about when I finished Red Dragon for this. was, whereas when we watched Peterson's version, while his way of defeating the Tooth Fairy was not as, we'll say, cinematic and deep as Red Dragon, at least we knew Graham himself got like the closure. He solved the case. He finished it. Whereas in Red Dragon, his wife had to be the one to put the bullet in the Tooth Fairy's head, but then nothing ever came of that. It was just, she killed him. She starts crying as Will's laying there. The next time we see the family, they're on the boat, movie over. And it's like, did the wife of a retired FBI agent, did she feel, is she mentally broken herself now that she had to murder somebody? It just kind of like ended too quickly almost. Like there could have been some form of conversation.
I gotta agree with you there because it felt like, okay, yeah, I have to agree with Chad there. As much as I like Red Dragon more than Manhunter, the fact that it was a bit too abrupt because, yeah, the wife kills the guy and then we just get like a closing monologue from Hannibal Lecter, like, I hope you're doing okay, and that's it. It's over. It's like, what?
Yeah.
And I will give it, the family had a much bigger impact in Manhunter also.
Oh, yeah. Well, they're given a lot more time to develop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think ultimately the reason I like Manhunter better is, even though I said, it's hard for me to pick between the two Hannibals and the two Tooth Fairies, and, while I think the ending is more satisfying in Red Dragon, I think for me overall it comes to the character's arc. And like I said, with Will Graham, in Red Dragon, Ed Norton just, he plays it. He's may have a troubled past, but hey, I'm a good cop and I'm going to take these guys down. Whereas just the arc that William Peterson goes on in Manhunter, just the pain he's going through and the back and forth with his own sanity that he deals with, it's just a more satisfying character arc to me.
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of the saying less is more.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the problems with Red Dragon. At times, it can feel a bit bombastic, like the opening scene. The opening scene where we see how Will arrests Hannibal. I mean, the dude's like, what, 50 or 60, and he gets shot like 3 times and stabbed with arrows.
How did he survive that?
Yeah.
Where did he get? He got stabbed right in he got stabbed in his stomach, so something critical probably got hit.
Yeah,
and then like you said, he got at like almost point blank range. No, he'd be gone.
Yeah, I definitely think we'd be better off without that scene. I think it's better. I mean, like Dylan said, it's less is more, and usually I'm a big fan of show don't tell, but I think there are certain circumstances, and I'm going to give another example when we talk about Silence of the Lambs, but I think this was an example of where, hey, maybe tell don't show would be better because, first of all, Anthony Hopkins is much older and him doing this intense scene might not be so realistic, but like Dylan said, it's just more bombastic, and I think it's better to leave that up to the viewer's imagination.
Yeah, because I let's just say Manhunter was the first one I ever had seen, and then I hear, then how did you catch me? You had disadvantages. It's like the story you put together in your head was probably more interesting. Like what piece of evidence did Will find? What altercation did he catch him in or something? And it's like, I don't know, but it's like all that we knew was disadvantages and he's crazy. Whereas I don't really know what disadvantage they were talking about in Red Dragon because Will found something written in a book.
Yeah.
Also, I will say one case where Red Dragon actually did the show don't tell bit better was when they find the toilet paper in Hannibal Lecter's cell, and they had to like assemble everything back the way it was without him getting suspicious. I do like how Red Dragon kind of handled that scene better. We see them actually rolling the tissue back in its place, and them pretending there's like a power outage or whatever.
I agree that was better.
Mm-hmm.
Even though Manhunter, that scene had a more cold clinical feeling. It's just people sitting in a boardroom talking about like, oh, we found his fingerprints and whatever.
Mm-hmm. And it had a great follow-up scene of them in Red Dragon of them taking all the stuff out of Lecter's cell. And Lecter's like, oh, by the way, that letter came to me accidentally, like denying something for the archives. I think we'll take Dr. Lecter's toilet seat.
And then there's that great scene where that dude like puts food inside the slot. Then he gets jump scared by Hannibal Lecter, but he's just saying thank you.
Yeah.
I love it.
Oh yeah. I'm trying to
So,
think of another-
I would say, is there any other big stuff anybody wants to bring up as a difference or positive, negative between the two?
I will say, Ray Fiennes is in damn good shape in this movie.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Voldemort's cut in this movie.
Yeah.
It's very
Yeah, and I'll say, sometimes, the scrawny, gangly serial killer can be creepier, but I look at Ray Fiennes, I'm like, this dude could kick my ass easily.
Uh-huh. Even more so in the TV show Hannibal, he's played by the dude who plays the Richard Armitage, the dwarf from The Hobbit.
Oh,
He's
Thorin.
like 6'3". Yeah, and he's like 6'3" and like really jacked in that.
Ooh.
Yeah, I saw that scene. That was when he was crawling along the table, and he
Yeah.
still had the mask on his head. Ugh, eerie.
I guess also one more positive thing to say about Manhunter. It's important to know that this is one of the first movies to ever show an authentic portrayal of criminal profiling and the FBI, how they use the psychological profiling to catch criminals. Because if you look at other serial killer movies before this, like Dirty Harry, for example, it's much more about the police work and finding the physical clues. They don't use as much psychology in that.
Now, didn't this show, wasn't this show like the inspiration for CSI?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, it has William Peterson, so.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, overall, yeah, I think, like Dylan said, the importance that, this is one of the first movies to show real criminal profiling is awesome. And while I can't decide between Lecters and Tooth Fairies, which one I like better, overall, Will Graham's arc of dealing with his own mental health and anxiety in Manhunter is just more satisfying to me.
Agreed.
Nice. Santino, closing thoughts?
I do like the fact that Red Dragon has a more cinematic feel and Manhunter more down to earth. But overall, I still think, honestly, after this debate, Red Dragon's still better than Manhunter by a slight margin.
Yeah, no matter what, I think we're all saying this is only a slight victory.
Yeah, it's hard to choose because I'm sticking with Red Dragon, but there's, like I said, it's like 51-49 because there's so many good things in Manhunter, but there's also so many good things in Red Dragon. But there's parts of Red. I think it really is. I think the Tooth Fairy's relationship with Reba that was expanded upon, that definitely, for me at least, adds to it, because that last scene in the house and her acting she brought another level to like the one thing that was missing in Manhunter, I thought.
Fair enough.
So that wraps up Manhunter versus Red Dragon. What did you guys think? Which one did you prefer? Let us know below. So for next week's episode, I am passing the torch to you, Santino. What are we talking next week?
I'm pretty sure next week's episode will be one with no debate because we will all be sucking off this movie. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be doing the classic horror film, Silence of the Lambs. See you next week, guys.
Adios.
Later, everyone.
Sayonara.